Alright. Cool. Is this working? Can you see me? Can you hear me? Cool. Yeah, it's looking like it's working. I've got it now on the whole screen. Is that better? I'll minimize the chat when I'm done. Oh, it's 1/6 scale. Okay, let me see if I can't. Oh, here, yeah, I can do that. That better? Alright, let me grab a pair of headphones so I will be able to hear the chat alerts in the background. Just a second. Alright. So, here's where we left off, I think. I'll just start over, I guess. These are your projects. Basically, you can just store. It's just a way of organizing your various things you're working on. Makes it really easy to share between other people you want to collaborate with. So if you want to start a new part, you can just go New Design, and it will save here into this folder. Sorry, I say a lot. It's just a thing I do. I'm trying to get over it. So here on the left, this is what we couldn't see before. We have the design tree. It's a little different in different CAD programs, but most CAD programs have something like this. And over here, under document settings, is where you can change the units. So you can set it to whatever you prefer, and you can set whatever unit you use the most as your default. I'm going to make this window just a little bit smaller so I can have the chat as a pop-out and be able to see it still. Just a moment. Alright, hopefully that's okay. Then I can see chat if you have any questions along the way. So, basically, the way that CAD design works is you build two-dimensional sketches and then you create features based off of those sketches. And the most common feature is called an extrude, and that's basically where you just take the profile of the sketch and pull it in one or the other direction to make a solid object. Some of the more complicated ones are revolve, sweep. I think if people are interested in these lessons, I will eventually go over most of the basic tools. And these are tools that are common to almost all CAD programs. You know, you'll see the same tools in SolidWorks, you'll see the same tools in Inventor, in AutoCAD 3D, in NX. They all basically work off of this principle. And so, to create a new two-dimensional sketch to build an object off of, up here we have the sketch toolbar, and when you select create sketch, it'll give you this plane select option. And these are your origin planes, and honestly it doesn't matter too much which plane you select to start building off of. You know, if you're thinking that whatever you're making is going to be vertically tall, maybe you should start in the XY plane. But as long as you build everything on the planes relative to each other correctly, it's not really important which one you select first. The only thing that it's going to affect majorly is what orientation parts are in when you drag and drop them into assemblies with other parts. And so you can make individual parts and then you can combine them in an assembly to make either a representation of just an assembly, or if you want to go a little farther, you can make the parts move relative to one another. You can make cool animations. Down here they have like a little play bar where you can mess with the different animations. But anyways, here we are in Create Sketch, and so we haven't selected a sketch plane yet. So I'm just going to select the XY plane. Just to show you, first off, I'm going to explain that there are a couple of ways to do the same thing in CAD design, and there's not necessarily a right and a wrong way to do a lot of things, and a lot of things you could do one way or the other, and with the end product it's going to make no difference. It really just is up to you as a designer how you prefer to do things. If you work at a company, they might have guidelines on how they want you to do specific things, but beyond that, you know, it's up to you, whatever you're more comfortable with. So for example, if we wanted to make a tabletop, just to keep it simple right now, a rectangular tabletop, we can go into Sketch Tools, we can select Center Rectangle, and that will allow us to draw a rectangle starting with the center. And we can click here at the origin, because that's just an easy point to start for the center of the rectangle. And as we click and drag out, some dimensions will appear, and you can set these dimensions. Let's say we wanted to make the table 3 feet by 5 feet. And one thing that's cool is when we're here in this dimension, we're in the inches units, but if we type 3 feet, it will calculate that to 36 inches for you. So I press enter and exit it out before I set the other dimension, and you can see it actually disappeared, and that's because since I didn't select anything for it, it just defaulted to being unspecified. And you can click here and drag out now this rectangle to make it bigger or smaller. So if we want to fix the size, you can come over here and use the dimension tool, and there's a shortcut for that. It's just the D key on the keyboard. So if you click on this top line and come up with your mouse and then click again, it'll prompt you to enter a value. So we said we're going to make it 5 feet, so we can enter 5 and then FT for feet. So it automatically calculated that to 60 inches. So now we have a rectangle here, and it's the correct size. You can click the center mouse button and kind of rotate around. You also have this view box up here, and you can click on various parts of it to rotate the view. It's actually pretty cool. So that's a good way to reorient yourself and get yourself oriented correctly. But you can click the center mouse button to orbit around. And that's why I was saying earlier, sorry, in the last live stream, the first thing I said was that it's very important that you have a 3-button mouse to do CAD design, because you can't do it with a trackpad on a laptop. It's not feasible. You need to be able to have a left click, a right click, wheel and a wheel that can click. So anyways, we have our rectangle here, and to make a solid object out of it, we can click up under Create, and we can choose the Extrude option, and that's the default option here. And so here we have this menu come up, and the first thing we select is Profile, and that's the profile we want to extrude, and that's just the rectangle we drew, so we click on that. And we have this Start option, and that's where we're starting from. So by default, we start from the profile we clicked on. We can have it go one direction, 2 directions, or symmetrically in 2 directions, where if you drag it out, it'll go in both directions, but we're going to choose one direction. And for a table, I think 1 inch is a reasonable thickness. You can also set a taper angle, which is kind of, will draft the item upwards. If you know what a draft is, you can see it's kind of tapered here. It's a common thing for cast parts. If you put a little draft on something, it'll be much easier to get out of a mold. Anyways, so we're kind of disoriented here, so we can actually just come and click here on the top and go to the left, and we're lost. So Control and click the center mouse button to pan, or there's also the options to adjust your views down here. There's Orbit, Look At, Pan. So anyways, we've got new body selected. That's when you have no bodies to begin with, that's the only option you can select. And here we have our rectangle, and this is a tabletop, a very basic one. However, if we wanted to, we could actually go about making this tabletop in an entirely different way. We can delete this that we just did. So this is your history toolbar, and this will show you what you've done. So we created a sketch here, and then we created an extrusion off of a sketch. And we can drag this timeline marker before that, and it will disappear. And the sketch doesn't show up because, in addition to having it display down here, we have in this tree over here created a sketches folder. And if we open this folder up, we'll see the light bulb here is dimmed next to this sketch, and that means it's hidden. And by default, as soon as you create a feature based off of a sketch, it will hide it automatically. So sometimes if you're working and you're like, where'd that sketch go? You might realize that you created a feature based off of it and it just hid it automatically. And you can go here and unhide it. And sometimes you'll want to create multiple different features off of the same sketch. Some people like to design that way. I personally don't design that way. But like I said, if you want to, that's fine. So anyways, we can come here and right click and go to Edit Sketch. And rather than making this 36 inches, we can make it 1 inch. And so now we have a really thin profile, and we can click Extrude and click on the profile and extrude it 36 inches. So now we've made the exact same shape, and we can hide this sketch again. Now we've made the exact same shape, but kind of come at it with a different approach. And that's completely valid. There's absolutely nothing wrong with either of these ways of doing this. You'll notice the view is oriented a little differently. Now if we click on the top, we're just looking at the thin side of the table, and that's based on how we made this. But you know, it doesn't really make a difference how you want to do it. Whatever you're comfortable with, the end product is going to be the same. So we have this table top, but it's just a rectangle. It's not very pretty. we can create another sketch and actually click on one of the surfaces of this table. So we click on this surface, and if we want to make like an inner frame for it, we can select another rectangle, and this time we can do a 2-point rectangle, and you can shortcut that with the R key. And you can really click anywhere in here, it doesn't really matter. Like we can even go outside here, because we can just click and drag it here, and it doesn't matter that it's not centered because we can set that with our dimension tool. So we can either go here and click dimension, or you can just click the D key on your keyboard, and while you can create a dimension just clicking this way, and this will set the line on the rectangle, you can also create a dimension by clicking on this line and clicking on this line, and this will allow you to set a distance. Let's set this at 3 inches. And so now we can do the same thing over here, and you'll notice as some of these dimensions get set, the lines turn from blue to black, and that means the line is what's called fully defined. And ideally, when you're designing something, you want to try and make sure all of your sketch features are fully defined, and basically that means you can't drag or move it because every degree of freedom that it might have is constrained by a dimension or a relation. And so I'll show you relations in a minute here. That's another really great way of constraining your sketches when you don't necessarily want to calculate dimensions or don't know dimensions, but you just want things relative to one another. But here we'll dimension here again. We can make this also 3 inches. And we can make this 3 inches. So, you guys still with me? Give me a thumbs up. Yes, there is a way to align objects together. I will get to that in the next sketch. So let's finish this feature, and then we can talk about how we can set relations to one another. So here's another sketch tool that's kind of cool. We can use this offset tool, and if we click on any of these lines, since this was created as a rectangle, it'll select the whole rectangle, and we can click and drag, but we can also set this as a specified distance. So let's make it 1.5, and so here we have now an 1.5 inch thick little rim. We can extrude again and go here. I just clicked and dragged, but it did 3 inches, and I think that's a good distance. So now we'll make a sketch, and we can set some relations to one another. I can show you how to constrain things and make them, basically, I think, hopefully answer the question that you just asked. So we're now looking at the bottom of the table, even though it says back up here. That's because we extruded it in a different way. So if we click here on Create Sketch, and we click on this inner rim down here, I'm going to pan over a little bit. And we're going to create a rectangle, and it doesn't matter where it is. So you see these 4 little icons these are relation indicators. And what this icon is indicating is horizontal / vertical, which means that this line is either fixed to be horizontal or vertical. And if you just draw a line off to the side like this, the way that you set relations is through this sketch palette right here. it should come up as a floating window. So if I click on this line here and select the horizontal vertical, it will automatically align it to whatever it's closer to. So if I draw a line that's closer to horizontal and click on that line and select the horizontal vertical tool, it'll make it horizontal. So we can click and drag, and so the click and drag in Fusion is interesting. If you click and drag to the left, everything this box touches will be selected. So we selected these two, we can delete them. However, if you click and drag to the right, only objects that are fully enclosed by the box will be selected. So you see this only selected that point on the corner. So if I wanted to select those, I would have to do that. But if I click and drag to the left, if I even touch these lines, it selects everything. Anyways, that's just a little aside. So we have this rectangle, and we want to set it to actually be a square. So we can click on this side, and then control click on this side, and you can set the equal relationship. And so now you automatically have set these dimensions to be equal. And so if I come and dimension and click the D key and do the dimension tool and make this 4 inches, it will automatically set the other dimension to be 4 inches. So I think that's what you were asking. And so that's one of many relations. And there are a lot of very useful relations. So let's go through a couple other ones. If you click on this line and then control click on this line, you can make them collinear. So it will move this over here, and it's now fixed. And if we do it here and here and make these collinear again, now it's fixed to be right here in this corner. And you see everything is black in the sketch, and that means it's fully defined. And there are these little icons that indicate the collinearity. These ones are for the equality relationship. And you can click on them and delete them. Click the delete key if you want to delete them. So sometimes if you try and do something, like if I try and click dimension and click here and try and do this, it'll say adding this dimension will over constrain the sketch. And that's because this is already defined. Since this dimension is set at 4 inches and this is set to be equal to this, you can't override that with the dimension tool. It doesn't let you do that. You have to delete this equal relationship before you can set that. So some of the other relations over here are coincident, collinear, concentric. So coincident means just like right on top of one another. Concentric is for circles. It means that the centers are at the same point. Midpoint we'll use in a second. Fix, unfix, we'll just fix something in a specific place. It's generally not something you want to use. If you can, you really should try and constrain your sketches using the other relationships and using dimensions rather than just using a fix. Parallel sets lines parallel to one another. Perpendicular sets them perpendicular to one another. Horizontal, vertical, we went over. Tangent sets a line to be tangent to a circle or curve. Curvature I've honestly never used, so I don't really know what that one is. Equal we used already, and then symmetry, you select 2 lines and then a third line, and it will set that line to be directly centered between the first 2 lines you selected, if that makes sense. But you know, it establishes a symmetric relationship between 3 lines. So we can demonstrate a couple more of those tools here. Let's draw a line, and let's draw it just randomly here like this. And we can click on it and set it to be horizontal, vertical. So now we have a vertical line. And if we click on it and control click on this line, we can click the midpoint relationship, and that will make the centers of both of these lines aligned exactly. And we can now drag this line to be longer. It doesn't really matter how long this line is because we're going to click on it. And you can either click construction here, or you can use the X key as a shortcut. and that will make this line into what's called construction geometry, which means it's just used for establishing relationships when you try and extrude, it won't actually register it as a line that's it's trying to make features based off of. Now, I don't know. Okay, so this actually is not fully defined because this can flip back and forth apparently. So how do we deal with that? We can set So we have a sketch feature that's not fully defined here because it can be flipped back and forth. I didn't realize that, but honestly, it's something that it's acceptable to keep it that way, I would say. I'll think about it if I can't think of an easy way to fix that. But let's, in the meantime, create another line, and we can set it. If you draw it, you can have a snap to grid option. That's this option right here, and you can turn the grid itself on and off as well. So if you have the grid option set, when you draw a line, it will lock it in the horizontal and vertical position. So that makes it easy, so you don't have to draw the line at an angle and then set the horizontal vertical relationship. So if we hover over this line, if we select this point and this line, we can set the midpoint relationship. We can make this line construction as well. And now we can use another tool, and that's the mirror tool. So you have objects and mirror line. So for objects, we're going to select the 4 lines of this square, and then for mirror line, we can select this line. And so now it's got this mirrored over here. So we now have this same square on both sides here. And if we do that again, we can select these 4, and these 4, and this line, and now we have all 4. And so while this is still underdefined, since these are that's really flashing. Since these are all mirrored, when you move one of them, it will move all of them. So that's kind of cool, actually. It will allow you to creating relations like that, and creating objects based off of each other like that will really simplify a lot of things. If you need to change things in the future, you might only have to move one thing around, and it will move all the other things the way you want them to. But now we have all this mess of relations here. That's not really a problem, though. I'm going to try one other thing here. No, never mind. Alright. So here we can create extrude and click on these 4. Can I unmirror one of the 4 boxes? How do you mean, like, just do 3? Just have it have 3 of them? So we can control Z. So we're back here and we just have the 2. So when we go mirror, I chose offset. When we go to mirror, we can just choose this box and then choose this mirror line, and now we only have 3 if we want. Is that what you were asking? Cool. And so if we want, now we can do another mirror here and click these 4 and choose this line again, and here we have this. So we can go to extrude and we click these 4 objects. We can start dragging it out. I think 29 inches, I don't know, that seems reasonable. And so here we have these operations which are join, cut, intersect, new body, and new component. So this is join. Join is usually default when you're building features off of other features. And that's just going to make them all basically one body. Like if you were to make this out of metal, it would be cast as one piece as opposed to having separate legs. So if you wanted these legs to stay separate, you can do new body. And they'll be connected, but they stay as a separate body. And you can eventually make them into separate pieces if you want later on. So I guess since the legs aren't usually made as a single piece of the table, unless you're carving it out of a giant piece of wood, we can make it a new body. So, I mean, here we have a really basic table. This isn't what I had originally set out to make, but we can make some modifications to it if you want to stick around, or we can call it a night. Because it's not perfect. You could use some visual adjustment, and if you want, we could add a drawer. Alright, well, let's do at least a few more features. Let's see what we have here. I don't need to do any of this right now. We can go to modify and fillet, and that will allow us to click on these edges of the table and we can set it to a 1/2 inch. And these features, constant length, chord length, this is something you can kind of play around with and get a feel for how it affects different things, as well as the corner type. It's kind of hard to describe exactly how it works with different things, but if you use fillets a lot, you can play around with these. And so we have these 4 edges selected. We've set it to be a 1/2 inch, constant radius, and we click OK. And so now it's rounded off these corners. So if you were to make an actual table, you would definitely want to do this to all of the exposed edges so you don't cut yourself. Now, let's see. Can you fill it by face? No, you can't. So that's one of the modify features. There's a few others. Chamfer is like a fillet, but it's sometimes also referred to as a bevel, or it's similar to a bevel. So if we make a 1/2 inch chamfer, it has this kind of trapezoidal shape. So, and then there's press pull. We can choose an edge, and you can. It's kind of like a fillet. I don't use press pull very often. It's sort of odd, but I guess if we do press pull and click on this front edge. So since tangent chain is selected, when we click on the front edge, it will select all 4 edges of the rectangle. So if you deselect tangent chain, oh, that's weird. It should only select the front one, but it seems to do all 4 anyways. Okay, we're not going to do that. We can just leave that alone. So I guess we'll make a cutout for a drawer, and we can stop there. So we can go create sketch, and we can make it like a little office desk with one of these drawers that's on this face. So I do not like that that's now upside down, so I'm going to rotate that. And here we are. We're in another sketch. We can, let's see. Unfortunately, we're going to use another rectangle. Most of these sketch tools are pretty self-explanatory. You know, circles, you can create them off of different points, like the 2-point circle is created off of the 2 outer points, or three outer points, as opposed to the center diameter circle where you set the center of the circle and then you choose the radius or diameter. Arcs is a similar thing. Polygon, you can go anywhere from 3 to 20 sides, and it will allow you to choose different features of it. Ellipse, same thing. Slot, these are something you can play around with and kind of figure out. Oh, I will kind of go over spline really quick. Spline is an interesting one. So you can click, and then every point you click from that becomes what's called an inflection point. If you're familiar with geometry, algebra, trig, math, it's the points, the points in the graph where the line turns. So every time you click, and you click enter when you're done, and so now you have this spline, and these are good for creating organic shapes and like really complex swept shapes. And so now you can actually drag these points around, and when you double click on it, this green thing becomes available, and that will allow you to move it up and down. If some of these tails aren't visible, you can go into spline settings. It's in your options and set to show these tails and such. But that's one of the more complicated sketch tools. They're fun. So we're just going to do a rectangle though. We're going to do a 2-point. We're going to draw it anywhere. Free draw. Not really. I will show you, after we do this cutout, I will show you a quick way to kind of freehand mess with stuff, but I don't know of a way to actually just click and hold and draw around. You usually are creating things in relation to one another and using either arcs or splines or straight lines. But anyways, actually we can call this good, and I'll show you. We'll stop sketch here. We can work on this in the future. And I'll show you some of the other things you can mess around with here. As far as freehand tools, you can go into, you can go into, under create, you can go into create form, and that'll enter you into what's called a sculpt environment. And here you can create various shapes to start with. We can just start with a box, go new body, one side, center, rectangle type center, lets you pick what plane, and asks you to draw a rectangle, doesn't matter what size it is. And then you can set various things like how many faces you want it to have. Like let's have it have 5 height faces, 3 width faces, and 8 length faces. And so now you see it's subdivided into all these boxes. You can set symmetry to be mirror, and you can set length, and it'll highlight these green lines. Width symmetry, that's not a good idea. That looks really complicated. And height symmetry, that also looks complicated. So now you're in here, and you can basically, under modify, you can go to, in addition to all these subdivide, insert points, merge edges, these are all things that you'll have to mess around with to really get a feel for them. I don't do a lot of sculpting. This is how you make much more organic shapes and organic forms, and I'm much more familiar with making mechanical parts, but this is something that I always want to get better at because it is really cool. And this is how you would make like body parts for car parts or something if you wanted to make, fenders. It's easiest to do it in something like this. So if you go to edit form, you can select one or multiple of these boxes. If you control click, and there's all these options over here, and then you have all these coordinates show up that you can basically, this will allow you to move it in plane, this will just move it out or in, this will kind of like rotate will actually move the line entity, and this will adjust the size relative to the other boxes. So this is A and C, so since I set symmetry, now we have it symmetric on both sides. So this is how you do you can kind of like just free move these around, and here we can unclick this and click on this and start pulling here. And so this would be the way that you would, create free shapes. Just starting with a basic shape. But this is still, if you really want to make like beautiful organic forms, I think you should probably ask some of the people who do that stuff, but I think a lot of them use tools like Maya or Blender rather than things like Fusion to make like the really, organic looking animal type shapes. This would be great for making car parts, rocket ship fuselage type thing, anything with a kind of a complicated shape, but not like fibers and hairs and clothes and stuff. So it's getting kind of late and I'm getting kind of tired, so I think I will pick up with this table. Here we can delete here. Let's click OK. We go back to model. Now we're back here in this environment, and we can click here and click delete, and our table is back. And we can save it. Table. And I guess one other thing I'll show you before we go is up here we have inspect and measure, which is a really useful tool. Can you import SVG into Fusion? I don't know what you can specifically import into Fusion. You can import quite a few different things. Okay, here, insert SVG. Well, there it is. So yeah, looks like it. But yeah, here in the insert, that's also how you would insert STL or an OBJ that you had, and I think it can handle both of those file types. But one problem with that is my experience with Fusion and working with imported file types is that it can be very, very slow with some of those imported parts. And then here, DXF, that's a very common manufacturing drawing format. And McMaster, I'm sure if you're familiar with mechanical components, you can get a ton of screws and fasteners and other bearings and stuff off of McMaster. And they have CAD models of them just available for you, which is awesome. So you can, if you're creating a part that is going to have screws in it, you can actually, as part of your CAD design process, kind of select the appropriate size of screw by using one of these utilities. But anyways, that's going to be it for tonight. If people like this and want me to do another one, I will do another one in the future. We can go over some of these other features like revolve and sweep, loft, and we can go over maybe some of the more complex sketch tools, and maybe we can try, I think another thing that might be fun to do is to try and actually pick a real-life object that a lot of us have and get some calipers and a ruler and model something based off of a real-life object, so we can explain, how to use calipers to measure things and how to translate that into your design. But that's going to be it for tonight. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.